Welcome to the fifth episode of the Fabric Spotlight series. This is a series of talks where we discuss entrepreneurship, technology with industry leaders, especially in the cloud and IoT infrastructure space. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Vijay Doradla, Director of Verizon Ventures. And Vijay, thank you very much for the investment. Thank you to you and to Verizon for the investment in the Fabric.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. We are going to get Vijay's perspective, especially on the business front, on the emerging technologies, key among them being IoT, connected cars, drones, 5G, each of which are pushing the boundaries of technology and use cases right now. Vijay, welcome.
Thank you.
Just absolute pleasure to have you at the Fabric. Before we get started, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself? Why did you get in the investing business, or however your journey so far?
Thank you very much for the question. And my name is Vijay Doradla. I'm a director at Verizon Ventures, and the whole journey of being an investor has been a long one. I've been an investor on the private market side as well as the public market side. I spent close to a decade on Wall Street in various different roles as a sell-side analyst at Deutsche Bank, and then it culminated that 10-year journey as a hedge fund manager and an entrepreneur. And I started a fund, which was a crossover fund, public-private fund, and the lessons I learned there are some very critical lessons that I use when I am investing in companies as well as dealing with entrepreneurs. So my quick background, I'm an engineer by training, and I have a background in physics. Spent close to 9 years at Bell Labs designing next generation wireless technologies. Then, as I mentioned, next decade was on Wall Street, and then finally Verizon Ventures. So I've been at Verizon Ventures for the last 5 years, and I'm delighted and excited to be an investor in the Fabric, and looking forward to working very closely with you guys.
Wonderful. Background in physics.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I don't know if it was when I was doing it, I hated it, and now I look back at it, I should have spent a little more time studying rather than, playing soccer and being part of a music band or whatever.
So we met about 5 years back.
Yes.
And it took us only about 5 years to convince you why you should invest in the Fabric, I presume. But what was your Verizon's thought process in investing in the Fabric?
So I'm gonna challenge you on that 5 years, because I wanted to invest day one I met you, but as you and I know, you had one of your most successful exits of VeloCloud prevented me from investing in the Fabric, because we were big investors in one of the competitors, that's Versa Networks. The minute you exited that investment, guess what? I called you.
That is true.
Do you remember that?
That is correct.
So the intention was always there. So a great question. We basically are trying to push the frontiers of innovation at Verizon through investments as well as partnerships with people like you and your entrepreneur network, where we believe that as new technologies like 5G and IoT, the cloud, blockchain, AI, all start moving into the enterprise, we as a company have to have a pulse on the market, as well as have some partnerships that could potentially help disrupt our markets, right? So that's the reason why we are very excited and interested in investing in the Fabric.
Wonderful. No, thank you very much. Talking about pushing the boundaries, you just mentioned IoT, you mentioned 5G, you mentioned a variety of different technologies. I'd like to get a little bit more deeper into those spaces.
Yeah.
From a Verizon perspective, even from your own personal perspective, because
Right.
you have seen a variety of companies, you're
Yes.
on board of a variety of companies.
Yes.
Where is the technology headed towards? Where do you see 5G's application? Is it all about gaming? I noticed there was a talk where
Yeah.
they said, wow, we could do more gaming.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's a lot more than gaming.
Yes.
So, the low latency aspect
Yes.
of 5G,
Yes.
the high throughput aspect of 5G. while it's not all about 5G, but the entire infrastructure world is having a revolution.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get Verizon's viewpoint on where all of this is heading.
Yeah, so great question. And we look at all these emerging technologies and frontier technologies that we are talking about, be it artificial intelligence, be it blockchain, be it IoT, and how the IoT vertical is being impacted by some of these frontier technologies. Then you layer on top of it the cloud, which has been an underlying sort of fabric of how things are changing in a very rapid fashion. And then on the bottom of all this is connectivity, right? And so how is the connectivity market itself changing dramatically with the advent of 5G, right? So we've been looking at these areas. We're investors in some companies like Spark Cognition in the artificial intelligence space. We have an investment in a blockchain company, one of the leaders in the blockchain space, by the name Filament. And needless to mention, cloud is part and parcel of our partnerships with Amazon or Microsoft or Google, is an ongoing, process at Verizon. And I think, this is a multidimensional problem, right? And a multidimensional growth vector, right? And so it's very hard to say how things are going to impact each other, right? So if you dial this back and look back at the earlier days, right? And we're doing some work around this, but if you take Moore's law and you apply Moore's law, a parallel of the concept of Moore's law to spectrum and throughput, I think you could draw some sort of parallel that as we went from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, the business cases around new businesses dramatically changed, right? And so you look at 2G, voice was a big application, right? And voicemail and ringtones and all that kind of stuff, right? And then you went from 2G to 3G, and 3G also had the 3G and a 3.5G. 3.5G HSDPA was where the shared concept of the mobile internet was introduced to the wireless industry. And that's where the iPhone was introduced, right, on AT&T's network. And so that was a game changer because of throughput, because of the fact that latencies were low, throughput was significantly higher, and more importantly, it was not a dedicated channel, it was a shared channel like the internet works, right? And then you come to 4G, where then all of a sudden you look at 4G and how the cloud and the web scale folks use the underlying technology, connectivity and latency, and build hundreds of billions of dollars of new business market caps with companies like Uber and Facebook and Snapchat and needless to mention, the list goes on, right? So now if we look at what is happening in 5G and we look at how these technologies are sort of converging, some folks have said they are calling this the fourth industrial revolution, right? And why it's so important is because you look at how artificial intelligence is coming into the enterprise in multifold various ways, right? So be it the financial vertical and the business processes automation, as in using RPA, you look at the edge and how AI will secure the edge from a security perspective. The next generation data models that are going to use AI to be able to hyper-personalize information. So that's artificial intelligence impacting the market. And then you bring in blockchain and you bring in other technologies such as next generation infrastructure in the cloud. This is an ever expanding area which is hard to predict how it's going to go. But I think one thing that at Verizon Ventures we believe is that these are critical areas that we need to focus on. And it comes back to why we invest in the fabric. And we invest in the fabric primarily for that reason. We want to build a relationship with platforms that are building new innovative companies. We want to have tap into the entrepreneurial network that folks like you are building, where it helps Verizon expand our sort of consciousness.
No, this is a wonderful tie-up of how technology has evolved in 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. And you answered part of the question which I was going to ask you next is, how do you see a co-creation platform like the Fabric working with Verizon? What's your vision of how the two organizations can cooperate? Clearly, we are a much smaller entity.
Yes.
You're a massively larger entity, but it's still quite flattering that you chose to work with us. I'd like to understand your vision of how you see this model working.
Yeah, so I think the first and foremost, we will be working with you very closely in helping some of your entrepreneurs, potentially getting introduced to the right set of people at Verizon. As you mentioned, Verizon is a Fortune 15 company, and with a huge, humongous organizations, one of the biggest challenges we hear from entrepreneurs is, who should we talk to, right? So that's the starting point of our relationship, where we can get the entrepreneurs and your companies in front of the right people and who have the right skill set to be able to have a meaningful dialogue with folks in your network. Now, fast forward this in terms of what is the possibility for us to do together. There are many things we can do, right? And I would say one of the things we're looking at very closely is, how can we use our sort of needs, okay? And I won't use the word needs per se, but areas of interest which we feel could be potentially disruptive outside, as well as very beneficial to Verizon. And how can we bring some of these ideas and ideate these things with folks like you, where if you think it's a good idea, you can go and start a company, and then we can work with them to solve that pain point within Verizon. So that constant dialogue that we'll have is something that we're looking forward to. And I think this will evolve over a period of time where we can collectively come and say, hey, this is an area where we want to start a company with you guys, and let's co-create this company with Verizon, right? And I'm sure your other strategic investors are looking at how we can use Fabric to co-create a company that will stand by itself on its own merits as a successful company, but will also solve some of the big pain points that strategic investors have.
No, wonderful. Yeah, we have worked with other strategic investors in the Fabric. We have created multiple companies. I'm truly excited by the vision you're painting, and I want to create some innovative companies. Now, moving from the Fabric to the individual entrepreneurs, what would you advise, whether they are under the Fabric umbrella or whether they're outside of the Fabric umbrella? What would you advise them as it relates to Verizon? What's the advice you would give?
Okay, that's a question that comes a lot to us, right? Because Verizon is a big company, and one of the feedbacks we've taken to heart is it's very hard to do business with Verizon because it takes a long time to get potentially even a small PO. And I remember one entrepreneur I was talking to a while ago, and she was very interested in signing a partner, signing some sort of a relationship with Verizon. And she said, all you do is, Vijay, give me $1, but I want to be able to put a press release out. And I said, I told this entrepreneur, I said, like, it doesn't matter if it's $1 or $100 or $1 million, it's the same process. And so one of the things I mentioned, when I talk to entrepreneurs, I say, you have to have patience. Okay, number one. Number two is also, you have to remember that the telcos themselves are now in a rapid phase of evolution. Okay, what is happening in the telcos is, 4 years ago, if you talk to a telco about virtualizing your EPC, or virtualizing your edge, or virtualizing some of the very critical network elements in your network, they would say it's not going to happen. But you go and talk to those folks right now, they say, when can I get it, right? And I think the evolution of some of these critical technologies coming into the telco is happening as we speak. SD-WAN is a perfect use case where if you look at the MPLS routing market, it's one of the most profitable markets for the telcos. Yet, despite that, we partnered with Viptela and we partnered with Versa to take these products, which essentially disrupt some of our core revenue streams, to bring this innovation to the market, right? So one of the things,
I should have said you should have taken Velo Cloud.
Hey, we can still work with them as part of the VMware, you know, and. Yes. But so if you look, I think what's going to happen is I think the rate of innovation at the telcos is going to increase faster. I think I'm predicting this in the next 5 years as an example, and I think the relationship and the conversations that entrepreneurs have with Verizon is going to materially change, given the fact that we're talking about virtualization, AI, blockchain, all coming into the network, right, and coming into the enterprise. And so have patience, work with the right set of people. Verizon Ventures is always open for business, so at any point of time you want to talk to us, pick up the phone and call us. We never say no to a meeting, and we're here as long-term partners to help in this journey.
Well, thanks very much, Vijay. Appreciate the time you spent with us. It was an exciting talk.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. We'll continue to host other exciting speakers, just like we had Vijay over here providing different perspectives on the technology and evolution of the cloud world. Thanks again.